Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman from our Islamabad studios. Today, we'll be talking about the Pakistan's economic outlook. Now, as we all know, that the government has been dissolved. The case is in the Supreme Court of Pakistan, whereas the opposition says that they have the right number to be in power. But this is what we call uncertainty. Look at the behavior of the stock market, or otherwise for that matter. Now, when a situation arises of this sort, definitely there's going to be pressure on the rupee, there's going to be pressure as far as inflation is concerned. What about the future of the policy? When we talk about IMF issues, well, IMF has agreed that once the new government is in place, they'll continue their support. But talking of today, what exactly is going to happen tomorrow, nobody knows. I'll just give you one little example. A day before the Ramadan started, imagine that the price of tomato, I'm talking about the retail price, was about 100 rupees a kg. And immediately in the evening, it was 250 rupees a kg. Now, who is responsible for this? Is it the inflation? Is it the government? No, the government is not responsible for that. Perhaps in a way they are, but they would never like that the prices should hike that much. Now, this is something to ponder upon. When you ask the retailer, he says the wholesaler is selling at this rate. You ask the wholesaler, he's going to come up with a very weird kind of an excuse. Now, this is something which is really important. This is where the governance comes in. Now, you talk about the Forex reserves. Again, that is pretty interesting because they are really falling at a very fast rate. Pressure on rupee now. It's already touching around 185 rupees, highest ever in the recorded history of Pakistan. When you talk about your monetary policy, although it is in a single digit but pretty high, is that the interest 9.5 almost 8.5 or 9? Is that going to basically affect your overall growth or not? Because that should be growth oriented idea. Whereas when you listen to the Prime Minister Mr. Imran Khan, he says that a lot has happened because of the COVID issue, and during the past almost 2.5 years, primarily because of the pandemic, everything has slowed down. Rates have gone up. Again, uncertainty is prevailing for very unfortunate reasons, but now was the time when Pakistan was getting out of this mess. And certainly, we got to know there is no more government in place, and perhaps elections would be held after 3 months. But now the ECP says they're not ready, so it could go up to 6 months. That is the winter. Obviously, we are looking at a larger turnout as far as the voters are concerned. But you know, this is what is making us pretty uncertain about various aspects and various elements. Now, to talk about it, before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that.
The ever-changing political developments in Pakistan are affecting the economy as well as the Pakistan Stock Exchange. In this mayhem, there are apprehensions regarding completion of outstanding 7th review and respective release of $960 million tranche of International Monetary Fund, and it is becoming more certain that it will not be possible to accomplish within the ongoing month. Meanwhile, the IMF recently stated that there is no concept of suspensions within its programs and that it will continue to support Pakistan and engage further once a new government is formed in the country to promote macroeconomic stability and inquire about intentions vis-a-vis program engagement. The Pakistan Stock Exchange also felt the heat of political mayhem as it suffered from intense selling pressure and pushed the benchmark index deep into the red with a drop over 1,200 points on 4th March. Where other major sectors of economy will be affected by this uncertain political situation, the stock market has already fallen below the 44,000 point mark on Monday. The benchmark KSE 100 index is also struggling as the investors are uncertain regarding the impacts of actions being taken by the authorities in the wake of the political turmoil.
Welcome back. Now, to talk about it, we have with us in our studio, on my right is Faheem Sardar Sahab, Senior Policy Specialist, SPPC. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. And we have with us on Skype Ariba Shahid. She's a business journalist. Thank you very much, Ariba, for your time. Pleasure to have you on the show. And Dr. Khaqan Najeeb Sahab, former advisor, Ministry of Finance. Thank you very much, Dr. Sahab, for your time as well, sir. Pleasure to have you on the show. But let me start with you, Faheem Sardar Sahab. When we did the last show, nobody knew that today there's no government in place. We had no idea that things would be taking such a turn, and so soon, interestingly. Now, sir, right after this, though the IMF definitely is looking at the situation and they believe that the moment the next government is in place, we'll continue the support. I guess World Bank is also keeping an eye on us. But having said that, sir, what sort of a damage, I would say, this particular decision, whether from the opposition or from the government, because there is no government in place, or at least Imran Khan's government is no more in place, let's put it this way. What sort of a change do you see now happening?
Thank you very much. I think the most critical thing in my assessment is policy continuity, policy realignment. Now, what has the government done right earlier, and what is going to change in the near future? This is the billion-dollar question. The government previously had worked very hard to build up an infrastructural aspect to the economy, in which basically foreign reserves were built up, industries were supported through incentives, new policies for freelancers came in, the IT exports, the textile exports, and construction industry all sort of gained. This is just a very quick summary of what happened positively. What was not helpful was inflation. What was not helpful was, for example, some sector not being able to come along into the economy like other sectors. Perhaps it did not receive the right incentives, perhaps it did receive the right incentives. We won't debate that right now. The bottom line right now that I see very clearly is that what policy is going to continue and what's going to be changed. Here is where the whole universe of uncertainty comes in. Here is where we've got all the question marks. Here's where, for example, are we going to maintain, let's say, a contractionary monetary policy? Are we going to maintain, for example, a policy that's tilted towards, for example, IMF? Are we going to maintain a policy where we're going to selectively give sectors some incentives, or is it going to be something more broad-based? Are we going to change our crude oil policy? Are we going to change, are we going to try to start to get towards electronic vehicles somehow, because we need to work on crude oil production usage? So,
do we have enough energy to go after that aspect? Because sir, I remember when they gave this idea that we should convert most of these cars or vehicles perhaps on CNG, not knowing that at the end of the day 6% of the total consumption would be on the cars. And what happened was that the prices went up, unavailability of the CNG, and everybody was crying later.
Yeah.
So right now, sir, if we go on electric, and if there is load shedding going on, sir, obviously the one who's going to keep an electric car would definitely have a, but sir, again, that's very debatable, but please, yes.
Certainly, every plan that is brought up, whether it's good or bad, needs to be thought through. The implementation aspect is extremely critical. We have to take it step by step, and we have to be extremely merciless in the kinds of flaws that might come up, the backdraft that we might face. We have to look at everything in totality in a holistic manner. Coming back to my original assessment, that right now policy continuity, in my view, is the most important thing. What will continue, what will be readjusted, and what will be, for example, curtailed or increased. That's also a debatable thing right now. Most probably what's going to happen, what I can foresee when I look into my crystal ball, is exports will be focused upon further. Certain sectors will be brought into the incentives package, and we are hoping that the freelancing incentives given to our youth, who were the 4th largest freelancing population on earth, that it will continue.
So if you remember, there were 6 programs launched when Mian Nawaz Sharif was in power, and God knows what happened to them. I never heard of it. Now we are hearing about the, similar sort of programs again. God knows what would be the future for those.
True, it's important.
Because again, you're absolutely spot on. You talked about the policy continuity. This is exactly what it is all about. Whether it's BISP converted into a SAS program or something of that sort. So one quick comment before I go to Ariba, and that is about the Roshan Pakistan digital account.
Yeah.
In fact, there was this very interesting debate on social media, and people were saying that they want to withdraw their money because they're not even sure, or they were saying that the Chief of Army Staff should give us the surety. I mean, he's not supposed to do that. But what I'm saying is that, again, uncertainty, that is what the problem is. and they said that somebody should assure us that our money is safe, because these people are mostly sitting abroad.
Overseas Pakistan.
Yes.
And if I can just very quickly share with you, any project that is launched has to be embedded into the legal system for it to remain continuous. Anything that's not in the legal system will be sort of set aside. Secondly, yes, it's extremely important for Pakistan that all forms of natural sureties should be given, because the system is working as it is. Nothing has changed except for a political change. Aside from that, the economy is functioning the way it is. Of course, the stock market is reacting, but that's what the stock market is.
They're supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if the stock market is not going to react, then there's a serious problem. So yes, you're right. I mean, if sureties are given at this stage, I think there's no harm. It's only going to be for our benefit.
All right. Now coming to you, Ariba. First of all, obviously a major change. Government has gone. Whether it's a good decision, a bad one, or an ugly one, that's a separate chapter. But as far as the economic indicators are concerned, few seem to be stable. Few have really shown a lot of reaction over the last happening, the major one, when the government dissolved the assembly, the National Assembly. Now, let's start off from your take on this particular issue, and what sort of areas do you believe will be hurt the most?
So before all this happened, the government, I'm hearing a lot of echo. Yeah,
Sorry,
so
Ariba?
this is better now. I can hear myself. All right.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is that before all of this happened, before the political turmoil came up, the economic indicators were already showing signs of deterioration, and that is also because of the fact that we rely a lot on imported fuel, and as a result, our current account deficit had been swelling up. Our currency had been depreciating, and our reserves had been depleting. Despite the rollover from China on a loan, our reserves are still depleting at a gradual pace, which results in our import cover also falling down to around 2.3-ish months. So these are alarming signs, signaling for something big that may come up in the future. And that is also because of the fact that there is no policy stability at this point. Until January, we were looking for fiscal and monetary tightening. However, immediately after the fuel subsidy announced and the whole economic package announced, we saw that there is a fiscal expansionary policy going on. So this, one step forward, two steps back approach in terms of fiscal prudence is taking a toll on economic indicators for Pakistan. So that's what I have to say about the economic indicators for now.
Now, another very important factor, and that is about the falling forex reserves. I mean, obviously, a very, very challenging economic indicator. A lot of payments are due. Plus, we also understand that this year the trade deficit could go up to $32 billion, and the next year forecast is around 35. Now, that is something, Faheem Saab, we all need to worry about. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, so there is no end. We don't see an end to this right now because we don't really know when fuel prices in the international market, commodity prices in the international market are going to taper down. That is something that we're unsure of at this point in time. And keeping that in mind, we don't really know how long the government can sustain, a lack of revenue in the form of taxes on fuel, and how long it can provide a subsidy. And then, in addition to that, the current account deficit is just going to keep swelling up. The currency is going to keep depreciating, and the reserves are going to keep depleting.
Now, coming to you, Dr. Saab, one important factor, the IMF the other day, they said that they'll continue their support for Pakistan and will engage on policies once new government is in place. Now, sir, what sort of changes do you see? Do you see more pressure coming in from IMF? Because there was a lot of reluctancy from the Khan's government that they would not accept each and every dictation, in fact, coming in from IMF. How do you see this going on now from here onwards?
Thank you for having me on the show. All the people before me have rightly put where the economy stands today. So I have always come on your show and talked about medium-term or structural reforms of the economy. this is the first time I'm going to change my view and say that short-term management, meaning 3 to 6 months, this budget and the next quarter after that are highly important right now.
Okay.
We stand where we are looking at this year's current account deficit between 5 to 6% of GDP, that is 16 to 18 billion dollars this year.
Yeah.
We are looking at our SBP reserves currently at $12 billion, which cover barely about
2 months.
months of our imports. Our debt and liabilities are at about $51 billion, which were 29 billion when this government had come in. Our inflation for March is running at about 12.7%. Our average inflation for the past 9 months is in double digits. SPP has rightly tightened. This will slow the growth. This is the picture of the economy currently. Our revenue side has been encouraging. FPR's collection is up about 29% in the first 9 months, but this is after 2 years of very slow growth. But over the last 4 months, we have seen that FBR has missed its target in the last 3 months. So it's a slowing growth in the FBR revenues. What is troubling on the collection side is also the non-tax revenues. Non-tax revenues are down about 17% compared to the last year, standing at about 783 billion for the first 7 months for which the data has been compiled. Our foreign direct investments remain stagnant at about 1.2 billion in the first 7 to 8 months. Our only foreign public investment is buoyed, and that is because of the sukuk that we did for 1 billion at the highest rate Pakistan has ever offered in its history. So the short-term picture of the economy is concerning. Now it is more concerning because as your question was that IMF 1 billion right now and another billion in June was built in to the gross financing needs of this year. Very important to understand, which are at about $32 billion. So if there is a delay, which is rightly there because IMF has to negotiate with the government, which will go on with the policies for the next couple of months. And right now, there is no leadership there, either in the form of the interim government or a longish government, which can make that commitment. So obviously, even the seventh review, when we were discussing, was being left unfinalized because the IMF could very well see that there is political disturbance in the country, there is a transition taking place. So what we need to do is, if we get an interim government, um, then we must have enough resources to pass this time well. Last time I was there when we did this, and we borrowed some $2 billion from China. And we passed that time because no longer decisions can be taken. But if we get another government in the form of a longer government through the Supreme Court verdict, then also we have to ensure that for 6 months we have enough reserves, we have enough collection, and we have a budget which is a stability budget for the at least first quarter till a permanent 5-year government comes in. I think that is how we should look forward.
So short term to medium term to long term, but currently Dr. Saab was saying that we need to focus on the short term because of the elections and everything. Now, so two major aspects. I mean, whether we hold elections in 6 months, because this is what ECP says and they are the final authority at the end of the day. But sir, looking at year 2022, which happens to be the most interesting year in the recent times, I would say, so much is going on. One important factor, sir, when you look at the overall, relationship with countries like United States of America, because currently, I mean, this is a reality. We read about it every day. We watch it on television. So shying away from United States of America or European Union, two of the largest trading partners, either you depend on your remittances, sir. FDI we were just told that it's hardly there, and you depend on your exports. So, sir, most of your exports, they go to EU and United States of America and perhaps they will revisit their policy towards Pakistan very soon. Perhaps the moment this Ukraine war comes to an end, or something of that sort happens, because they have realized. I was in fact listening to a very interesting news that a country like Lithuania, they said they don't need any more gas or energy supplies from Russia. Forget about rubles. They said we will get it through LNG. I'm just saying that, I mean, this is a great decision for them, but not a very great decision for the Russians. So things will change. Perhaps the sanctions on Iran could be lifted at some stage. We heard that this P5+1, they're very eager to sort this issue out, and once that is done, a lot of money is going to be released, $200 billion of Iranian, which is stuck, that huge amount is stuck in the United States of America and elsewhere in European countries. Things will change. Things are supposed to change. Effects for Pakistan, the current global scenario.
Okay, it's a huge question. I'll try to take it systematically. We have to sort of back up a little bit. What was Pakistan doing for the past 2-3 years, even perhaps more? Our relations with Russia are not something new. Pakistan has been in touch with Russia for almost a decade now, easily. And the ice that was there has been thawing out for some time. In the recent past, Pakistan has intensified its diversification process. You should diversify your relations across the earth, just like every other country. I mean, you have India and China at each other's throats on one side, and right, next door to that theater, that conflict theater they're trading, you have China and America at each other's throats. You have their carriers looking at each other. You have their missiles pointing at each other, but they trade in trillions of dollars. So one has to sort of step back and look at the thing a little more realistically, a little more factually. We did not shy away from any country. We did not shy away from, in fact, we've been opening ourselves up. We've even said to the United States that CPEC is open for investments. Who's stopping them? Nobody's stopping them from investing in CPEC, in our SEZs. In fact, on CPEC, and one of our hydro projects in which sort of borders the CPEC, which is very close to the CPEC, the turbines are from General Electric. It's a Chinese project using General Electric turbines. So basically how we sort of portray our views across must be very clear. We also have to understand that many countries abroad are under pressure. What Russia did in Ukraine was they weren't expecting it. This was the black swan that was actually, well, no, not that much of a black swan, but Russia did say that it would do something, and Russia did it.
Don't cross the red line, and
Yeah,
they did.
They did. So even Pakistan, I think, at some point had been cautioning certain countries to not play with fire. Don't get involved, ingrained into something that you cannot handle. War is not good for anybody, even for war economies. At the end of the day, what Pakistan was and is going to continue doing is to diversify its relationships. That does not mean you shy away. That means you open up new fronts. I'll give you an example. Pakistan has a Look Africa philosophy. Why does that never come up in our discussions? It just doesn't come up. But we have a certified, bona fide, pursued policy to increase our relations with Africa. That has never been discussed anywhere. I find this to be fascinating because if we are talking to one country which happens to have problems with another
And
country.
you're talking about a market, African market is
huge.
1.35 billion people.
Yes, it's huge. And we most of our products, we have something like, I think, 4,000 HS codes that are active. Most of them are applicable to Africa. So what I'm sometimes perplexed. Why is this suddenly this binary view of life? When did countries become binary? America is thinking of buying oil from Venezuela. China is exporting to America. America is importing from China. Russia is selling gas to Germany. Germany is buying gas from. You see, it's to see things in a mutually exclusive way. Okay, fine. Let's be fair. You can be binary if possible. It's not possible, but if you can be, that's fine. But you cannot be mutually exclusive. We have to maintain relations with all countries on earth.
That's how it should be.
Even our neighbor. I mean, I'm just saying that maintaining our national integrity in all targets that we have to achieve, maintaining our sovereignty and our full-blown rights, we have to engage with other countries. And incidentally, when you engage with other countries, that's when the effect starts to occur on FATF and WTO and all those other important forums. This is something which we do not connect. If one country is upset, let's talk to them. Simple.
You believe that one of the major reasons, obviously the widening trade gap which we see,
Yeah.
though we claim that the imports, they have declined. Yes, they have significantly declined, because if you're going to put that kind of a tax, who's going to import that? No, there won't be any buyers here. Exports, they believe that they are increasing, but God knows what sort of a parameter they have to judge that, even if they are at a very, very minimal level. Faheem Saab, tell our viewers that now, since this trade gap that is widening, that is something very alarming also at the same time. We are not looking at the new virgin markets, whether in the Latin America or in Africa, as you just talked about. Neither are we looking at the Far Eastern side. When you look at your trade with China, obviously it's in the Chinese favor. I mean, just sending something worth 10 million won't change anything. You have to have a policy. You need to move away from textile and get into IT or other high-tech sectors for that matter. And Pakistan has the potential. Similarly, Faheem Saab, one important factor that I really believe is like product diversification.
Yes, that's true. Very
I think we really need to focus on that. And let me take this point to Ariba Shahid. Ariba, since you are based in Karachi, and Karachi is a very different city as compared to Islamabad. Over here you will have government offices, but when you talk about the real business, obviously Karachi is the hub. Karachi is a city which feeds the entire Pakistan, it absorbs everything. Now, when you generally have a word with people sitting in Karachi regarding the overall economic situation of Pakistan, or perhaps the upcoming budget or anything of that sort, what sort of a reaction prevails? Because at the end of the day, what's brewing in our mind really matters. Tell us about that.
So the business community is kind of divided in the sense that the minute an amnesty scheme or the minute a package is announced for the public, they are happy with the government, whatever government we had at the time, and the minute a tightening scheme is announced, they're annoyed. So that is happening, but overall, the hardcore true businessmen are focusing more on fundamentals. And whenever they see deteriorating fundamentals, they are concerned and they voice their concerns. They form a lobby. They present their concerns to the finance ministry, to the state bank, to the government, in all forms whatsoever. But in essence, the deteriorating economic indicators that we have been witnessing over the past few months, they have been a concern. However, yes, with exports increasing, and policies to encourage exports increasing, the business sentiment is still not dampened, like as one would say it is. The business sentiment is pretty upbeat and pretty positive.
So, now one important factor, and that is about, because I remember I was in States when this 2007-8
market collapse.
This was actually, perhaps I can say that was a kind of a crash, because forget about the houses that people had to leave. The banks were practically taking away their vehicles, the cars, which wasn't something very normal in the United States of America. That recession caused so much, and people used to even talk that what is this going on, because certainly whatever happened, it has a long story. In Pakistan, a lot of people believe that, oh my God, this government, forget about the government, this country is in dire straits, IMF has taken over, and most likely in the future, we can default. Dr. Saab, just tell us, before I go back to Ariba again, just tell us that, I was listening for a bailout package given to Argentina by IMF. It's a huge package.
Yes.
But I also remember that night when the peso went down by 35% in one night. People were hiding that in their covers of their pillows perhaps, but this is what happened the next day. So, sir, when we say default, what default does mean? Please tell our viewers. And default, does it mean that now the country cannot revive back, or it has to really depend on the foreign loans? I mean, what exactly can happen? Because currently a lot of people believe that this budget is going to be a challenge and a half for whichever government is in power. Your take, Dr. Saab.
So I think we should be quite comfortable with the fact Pakistan has never ever defaulted on its foreign exchange payments or bonds or sukuk or to development partners or to bilateral partners. And even now, there is nothing like that exists. Today, I was hearing UAE's $2 billion have been rolled over. The reserves should be a bit better as the Chinese rollover comes back, which is, I think, about $2.5 billion. I don't foresee that Pakistan will get into that situation. And there has been many a times that balance of payments difficulties have come. We have done about 2022 IMF programs. IMF is a doctor of the last resort. That's the easiest way to understand it. It's like when you see your economy in an ICU kind of a position, you go to the fund adjusts on the monetary side, on the fiscal side, and any other bleedings, in our case, the circular debt bleeding, the gas sector bleeding, and tries to limit the damage that is going on and using pricing adjustments, which are very heavy on the people, pricing adjustments like making sure that the currency is rightly showing the strength of the economy, the fiscal deficit is limited. So all these measures, but these are the short-term measures to take you out of the ICU. Once you come into the general ward, then that is where our own work must continue so that we can start running. And that are the fundamental decisions that we need to take. If we want to attract good FDI, let's say, so do we want to present something to them? Do we have a divestment program which shows that we have a PIA to sell, we have a steel mill to sell, we have the discos to sell, we have the gas companies to sell, we have the SME bank, the first women's bank to sell? Do we have a regulatory regime which is world class so that we can attract people to come in and invest, and they make sure that their currency is protected, their intellectual property rights are protected, their property rights are protected? Do we have an investment climate that makes importing easy so that the tariff barriers are lower and exporting easy? We have a market of 230 million people in the country. A lot of them, 60% of them, are youth. Can we use that youth to make sure that our IT and ITES is not around 2 billion or 2.5 billion, but grows to about 10 to 12 billion dollars? Do we
Look
have
at India. I mean, unbelievable.
do we have the strength to make sure that we take our FDI in the real assets from this meager amount of about $2 billion that has existed over the last many years to again $10 billion? Do we have the strength to make sure that our remittances continue to grow because we are doing the right things in terms of the incentivization? Our rupee is float, yet in a band where the real effective exchange rate is reflective in the rupee. So these are all the fundamental things that we have to do. On the imports, I want to make a point because people think that our imports have grown, and which is disturbing. Of course it is. But look at it. Our $8 to $10 billion of import last year were agri and food related items. Short on cotton, short on wheat, short on sugar. Lentils we already did.
Exact
So
80% lanterns, just imagine.
edible oil we already do, the prices went up. So yes, there is a price effect, there is a rupee deval effect, but there is also the effect of our productivity waning in the agriculture sector, which is largely responsible for this 8 to 10 billion. I mean, look at, friends, just look at the fact that Pakistan was doing 12 to 14 million bales of cotton just a few years ago. And
Now
we
you're
have now
importing?
fallen to 7 to 8 million bales. That indeed is disturbing. So that means that our agriculture reforms in the long run must work so that our productivity is improved to feed the 230 million people, ensure that the stunting in the country goes down, raw material is available to feed the good export industry that we have built, especially by giving the turf and the concessional financing at very low rates, so that we can build this economy covering the imports of agriculture locally and ensuring that the exports grow on productivity and not on cheap electricity or packages of amnesty. I think that now is the fundamental structural shift that the country has to start making. Once you make this shift in the coming years, then you will also find that markets will open up anywhere. You have the GSP plus, you have the US, then there is the Far Eastern market, the Africa has been tapped. So, and then you can slightly also start thinking that if you are manufacturing mobile phones, you can become a GVC, a global value chain part. So all these opportunities will pull up, but we must
Motorcycles for that
pull.
matter. I mean, Africa is such a huge market for that.
We're already exporting to them, and we can increase it.
You
further.
can increase them because this concept of bikia, in fact, started from Africa, if I'm not wrong, because you can get a taxi there that is a bike. So, one more important point, sir, since you were talking about edible oil, that is also something which we import. Sir, what's the rocket science? Because I'll just give you one example, and I just want you, Dr. Saab, to throw light on, and then I would also like Faheem Saab to comment, and even Ariba, who's in Karachi. Now, one thing. Let's start from there, sir. We do understand that these are the things which we import. Good enough. We should not. Pakistan was always considered as an agro-based country, sir. I mean, you look at the the slogan of the government. You'll see that wheat crop and so many other crops, and then you'll see there's a tire also that shows the that reflects about the industry and so on and so forth. I think either that should be changed or everybody should be focused on that. There are two ways about it. I was looking at the map of Ukraine that is considered to be the food basket of Europe and perhaps the world in a way. It is blue and yellow. Blue is for the sky and yellow is perhaps representing the crops, the golden crops. So that is called an agro-based country. Not a country like Pakistan, which has imported everything they were depending on. Once they were exporters, policies were wrong, governments had no clue what they were up to, easy money through IMF or otherwise. I mean, that's how it goes on. Because if you're taking money even from a bank, you're supposed to invest it and make something out of it and return whatever the bank has given you, and then that's how it is. It's not like that you take the money in Pakistan and you get the waiver. IMF is not going to give you the waiver because that money you have taken from a financial institute for your country, but you have spent it on yourself. Unfortunately, this is what has been happening so far. Quick comment, Dr. Saab, and then over to Ariba, and then finally we'll come back to Faheem Sardar Saab.
The quick comment is that IMF, while you're in the ICU, helps you get out of that ICU. Pakistan has been in that ICU because of a balance of payments crisis. So both import needs have to be looked at and the exports have to be picked. On the agriculture side, I think what has gone missing very quickly is that we invest 0.8% of our GDP in R&D. That is factually nothing for a country like Pakistan. There was the Green Revolution in the 60s and 70s. Pakistan was a great participant. Productivity went up. We missed on the Green Revolution. You hear about the BT cotton not coming to Pakistan, going to India. They doubled, tripled their cotton production. And now the world is going through an AI revolution. After missing the Gene Revolution, we must become a part of this kind of farming techniques which are increasing productivity. And that is where our institutions, academic, like the Pakistan Agriculture Research Council, the National Agriculture Research Council, the Faisalabad Agriculture Universities, The role of these will become paramount to train, educate, make literate our farming community on what is needed today, and then combine them with the world so that their markets open up and we can not only start doing our own edible oil, our lentils, our wheat, our productivity, but also exporting these kinds of goods, processed food. And that is something. And fisheries also present a large opportunity for Pakistan. Pakistan's sea line has the capacity to do this. I've read a very good report recently done by one of the developmental institutions on this. So this is the kind of the holistic program that we should be looking at.
By the way, Pakistan has everything, sir. But I think one major factor, that is the will, that seems to be missing, unfortunately. Ariba, your take.
So I also feel in terms of food security in agriculture, I also feel that we need to make use of these agri-techs that are popping up. A lot of startups are working on agri-tech and how to streamline the supply chain because with R&D, of course, you can increase your output, which is essential, but increasing output will be futile if there is no proper supply chain created. The processing of the crops and the output that we produce is essential. Bringing it up to par with international quality and standards is essential so that, if any surplus is ever generated, it can be exported. Because at this current point in time, the outputs that we have, they aren't really processed. They are sent abroad and they're processed there. And then the value addition that should happen in Pakistan does not really happen. So the streamlining of that, the implementation of proper warehousing, these are investment decisions that the government and individuals in the sector need to work on, without which we won't really see any fruits of labor. But yeah, there are lots of startups working on agri-tech. However, I just hope and pray that they do not turn into middlemen themselves that exploit the system eventually over time.
So if I can interject and make a point, this is very important. If you make investment decisions based on the incentives by the government, you will be thinking real estate in Pakistan. Pakistan's saving rate, in my opinion, is
You
not
just
very
stole
low.
my question. Dr. Saab.
Oh, sorry. So, because I think Ariba pointed very rightly. So, investment decisions by the economic agents are made on the incentives that are prevalent in a country. And if that's so, right now, for the past 2.5 years, and decades, you have a real estate that you've propped up. By giving in amnesties there, by making sure that the capital gains tax never existed. And I've
Because the
always been
focus
on
of the
the
government
table.
was there 24/7. Interestingly, whether COVID or no COVID, your construction sector should keep on working because there are 50 different, they're attached to it, different businesses, I would say, whether you talk about steel or you talk about the wood, and there's a long list. I mean, just imagine when you're constructing a house, you're also paying taxes on each and everything. Indirect or direct, that's a separate issue. But it keeps things rolling. And so, whether you talk about the remittances, I'm not sure about the exact number, I'm sure you know that everybody wants to buy a plot or buy a house or invest in real estate in the form of some investment. And then, make some money out of it and then again reinvest in the same construction business. Is it providing us jobs? What exactly is this construction supposed to mean to the economy?
I think we just need to back up just a little bit
Because Khan Saab's focus was on construction.
Yeah, because it's a multiplier industry. It sort of takes care of, as you said, 30 plus industries with it. It's a multiplier industry. In economics, in hardcore economics, practical economics, you should always focus on multipliers. Having said that, if we do not plug our hemorrhage, there is a certain amount of hemorrhage that's happening. I'm working on it, financial and non-financial hemorrhage. Unless we plug this, we are going to continue talking about the same problems. By the way, this topic that I just brought up, hemorrhage, I've spoken to you about this, I think 2 years ago. So it's nothing new. Right now, Pakistan was going through a transition. How the rupee fell, that needs to be sort of curtailed. It needs to be reversed. I personally, I think an expansionary monetary policy, slightly towards the expansionary side, is easier for businesses. So you get more tax, you get more business. But I'm going to end my conversation on one single point: policy continuity or calibration. We have to now be very watchful of what is going to be calibrated. And by the way, we're not the only ones who are watching this. All international agencies are waiting for what new policy measure is going to be taken, if any, or will the same policy incentives and structures be continued.
All right, thank you very much, Faheem Saab. Ariba, it was a pleasure having you in the show. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. But if I may conclude in a very, I mean, it's a very, very serious topic, but I think one should have a smile in the face also. When you say that you are having a hemorrhage policy, your patient is in ICU, you have severe energy bleeding going on, and at the top, IMF is your doctor. Think about it. Anyway, I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.